Okay, so these days, it feels like everyone's meeting online. Dating apps, social media, it's all become so normal. But there's a dark side too. And that's what we're going to dive deep into today. Romance scams.
And it's easy to think, oh, I'd never fall for that. But these scammers, they're pros. They know how to manipulate, they play on your emotions, that desire for connection. And it can be really convincing.
So it's not just about being naive, it's about understanding their playbook, how they operate. So let's break it all down so we can all protect ourselves.
Exactly. The first step is understanding their strategy, how they gain your trust, and ultimately how they get to your money.
Okay, so walk us through it. What's the typical anatomy of a romance scam?
Well, it usually starts with this charming online persona, reaching out on a dating app, maybe social media, and it can be really intense right from the start. Lots of compliments, lots of attention. They might even mirror your interests, things you've posted online to try to build that connection.
So it's targeted, not just some random approach. So once they've got you hooked with all that attention, how do they go from like Prince Charming to asking for money?
That's where the crisis comes in.
Yeah.
So they've built this trust, you feel special, and then bam, there's an emergency, a sick family member, maybe a business deal gone wrong, or some big story about needing money so they can finally travel to meet you.
Ugh, it's awful. They prey on your empathy, your good intentions. And like our sources, especially the David Israel podcast show, point out, this isn't about being gullible. Anyone can fall victim to this.
Anyone. And it used to be that you could spot a scammer, bad grammar inconsistencies in their stories. But these days, they're getting much more sophisticated. They might even have accomplices to make the whole thing seem even more real.
So how do we stay ahead of them? It's like a moving target.
It is. And that's why awareness is so important. And honestly, one of the best things you can do is be really careful about what you share online.
Because you might not even realize how much information is out there. Your job, your location details about your family, it's all there on social media.
And they can use that
Yeah.
to build this really convincing persona and tailor the scam to your vulnerability.
So it's like a custom design scam. Wow. Okay, so takeaway number one, guard your digital footprint. Be mindful of what you're putting out there.
Right. And our sources also have some great practical tips.
Oh, yeah, let's get into those.
Have you ever used reverse image search?
Oh, yeah, all the time. You take a photo, upload it, and it'll show you if that same picture appears anywhere else online. So if they're using a stolen photo, busted.
It's so simple, but it works. And most dating apps and websites, they have their own security measures in place too. Algorithms flagging suspicious accounts, things like that.
Okay, that's reassuring. But even with those safety nets, we still got to be vigilant. There's another tip that David Israel podcast mentioned that I think is just brilliant.
The video calls.
Exactly. It seems so obvious, right? But suggest a video chat early on. A real person who's interested in you will be happy to connect face to face.
But scammers, they'll come up with all sorts of excuses. Broken camera, bad internet traveling.
Yeah. And some of those excuses might have a grain of truth to them. They might be in another country, using a VPN.
Exactly.
That's why it's so important to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Challenge them on inconsistencies. Or just end the conversation if you're not comfortable.
Absolutely. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Right, because we're not just talking about protecting your heart here. We're talking about your finances, your identity, your overall well-being.
Exactly. And before we move on, I think it's important to stress how serious this is. This isn't just a few isolated incidents. Romance scams are a huge problem.
Yeah, and the emotional and financial damage can be devastating.
It is. In fact, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, the IC3, they reported that romance scams cost people over $700 million
Right.
last year in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
And that's just what's reported. The real number is probably much higher.
That's a staggering figure, and it shows why it's so important to talk about this. Openly, honestly.
We have to.
Yeah.
The more we understand, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves and others.
Exactly. And in the next part of our deep dive,
We're going to go even deeper into the psychology of these scams, how they manipulate emotions, exploit vulnerabilities to gain your trust.
this is where it gets really fascinating. We're going to get into the mind of the scammer. So stay tuned. All right, so we're back and ready to dig even deeper into this whole world of romance scams. We've talked about their tactics, the technology they use, and how important it is to protect our information. But now I really want to get into the psychology of it all. How do these scammers tap into our deepest desires for love and connection and use that to manipulate us?
It's like they've studied the human heart, but only to figure out how to exploit it. They understand what makes us vulnerable, that longing for intimacy, and they use it to craft these elaborate performances. of love and devotion.
It's like they're creating a custom-designed fantasy
Mm.
for each victim, and it works because it plays into our own desires. We want to believe in true love, in finding that special someone.
Right, and they feed into that. Remember how we talked about the mirroring your interests, your experiences? That's a classic manipulation tactic, making you feel like you found someone who gets you, someone you have so much in common with.
Yeah, it's not just about shared interests, though, right? It's about emotional mirroring,
Yeah,
too.
exactly. They might share personal stories that resonate with your own experiences, making you feel seen and understood.
Like on a deeper level.
Yeah, and this can be especially powerful for people who are feeling lonely
Right.
or maybe lacking confidence.
Right, like you're looking for validation.
Exactly, and the scammers prey on that. The David Israel podcast show actually interviewed several victims of romance scams, and a lot of them talked about feeling unwanted or overlooked in their offline lives.
So the scammers make them feel special, desired.
Exactly, and what's even more insidious is how quickly they escalate the relationship.
Right, in the real world, love takes time.
But in the scammers' world, it's all about creating this whirlwind romance, this instant intimacy that can cloud your judgment.
Making it harder to see the red flags.
Exactly, that rapid escalation is deliberate. It's about overwhelming you with attention and affection, making you feel like you're swept up in something special.
That's destiny.
Yeah, and it plays into this psychological phenomenon called the halo effect, where your initial positive impressions of someone can blind you to their negative qualities.
So you're so smitten with this charming persona that you overlook the things that don't add up.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to step back, take a breath, and really examine the situation objectively.
Ask yourself, does this feel right? Do their actions match their words? Are they genuinely interested in me? Or are they just trying to sell me a fantasy?
Those are great questions. And it can be really helpful to talk to someone you trust, someone outside the situation,
Mm-hmm.
who can offer an objective perspective.
Yeah, because they might see those red flags that you're missing.
Exactly. It's like having a friend check your blind spot when you're driving. They can see the dangers you might not see.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit.
Yeah.
And talk about the financial aspect, because ultimately that's what the scammer is after. Your money.
Right. And they're experts at manipulating you into handing it over.
Right,
It's not just about asking directly. It's about creating this web of lies and emotional pressure.
That makes you feel obligated to help.
Exactly. They must start small, asking for help with a minor expense, just to test the waters.
And once you've proven you're willing to give,
They'll escalate their demands, weaving these elaborate stories, hardship, misfortune, threats to their safety.
and because you've formed this bond, this trust, you feel like you have to help.
Right. They play on your empathy, your sense of responsibility, making you feel like you're the only one who can save them.
And they might even use guilt and shame.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you really loved me, you would help me. I thought I could count on you.
Wow, it's psychological warfare.
It is the breaking down your defenses, making you question your own judgment.
And it can be financially devastating.
People end up drained, not just from the money they've sent, but loans, credit cards, retirement savings.
It's tragic.
It is, but it's important to remember. There is hope. There's help available.
That's a good point. We don't want to leave our listeners feeling hopeless. So in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to talk about what to do. If you suspect you or someone you know is caught in a romance scam, how to report these crimes, where to find support, and how to start healing. Okay, so we're back and we've been talking about these romance scams, the tactics, the psychology, how they prey on our emotions. It can feel kind of heavy, but we don't just want to explore the problem. We want to empower you with knowledge so you can protect yourself and the people you care about.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that you've been scammed, that's a huge step.
It is.
It takes a lot of courage to admit it, even to yourself. The shame, the embarrassment can be overwhelming.
And imagine that's why scammers thrive on silence. They're counting on victims being too afraid to speak up.
Absolutely.
But that's why we're talking about it, sharing these stories, those red flags. That's how we fight back.
Right, and that includes talking about how to get help. So the first thing anyone should do, if they think they're being scammed, cut off all communication.
Just completely ghost them
Basically block them everywhere.
on every platform, every app.
Every way they can contact you.
Okay, that makes sense. But I bet that's easier said than done. You know you've built this connection. You might even feel dependent on them.
It is hard. But you have to remember, this isn't a real relationship. It's all fake.
Yeah, it's an illusion.
And holding on to that illusion is only going to hurt you more in the long run.
Okay, so you've blocked them. What next?
Reporting it is crucial.
To the authorities.
Yeah, not just for your own sake, but to potentially protect other people from falling victim to the same scammer.
So who do you report it to?
In the U.S., you can file a report with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. They call it IC3.
IC3. Okay.
It's an online portal. You can describe what happened, upload any evidence you have, emails, chat logs.
And can you track the status of your complaint there too?
You can.
Okay, and I'm guessing other countries have similar organizations.
They do. Most countries have their own cybercrime reporting agencies. You can find a list of them on the IC3 website, actually.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. We'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah, and you should also report the scam to the platform where it happened.
The dating app or social media site?
Right. They have a responsibility to keep their users safe.
And the more reports they get, the better they can be at identifying and stopping these scams.
Exactly.
And what about your bank or credit card company?
Oh, yeah. If you've sent money, definitely contact them. They might be able to help you recover some of it.
Okay, that's good to know. And what about the emotional side of things? Where can people find support to cope with the trauma and rebuild their lives?
There are some great organizations out there. They offer counseling support groups, even financial guidance.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, one of them is the National Adult Protective Services Association.
Yeah.
And NAPSA,
Yep.
they have a lot of resources specifically for victims of elder financial abuse.
Which often includes romance scams.
Right.
So it's not just about practical support, it's about emotional healing, too.
It is talking to a therapist,
Yeah.
someone who specializes in trauma. Can be so helpful in processing these complex emotions.
Yeah. And realizing that what happened isn't your fault.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
didn't do anything wrong. You were targeted by someone who's very good at what they do.
That's so important to remember. And you know what I find really inspiring is that a lot of victims of romance scams end up becoming advocates.
I know, it's amazing.
They use their experiences to educate others and help prevent these crimes.
It's like they're taking back their power,
Yeah.
turning their pain into purpose.
Exactly. And that's what we hope you'll take away from this deep dive. Knowledge is power. And by understanding how these scammers operate, recognizing the red flags, talking about it openly, we can make the online world a safer place for everyone.
We can.
Yeah.
True love shouldn't feel like a transaction.
Okay.
It shouldn't come with a price tag.
Right.
Trust your instincts. Be cautious. And never be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
Such an important message. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of romance scams. We hope you feel empowered to navigate the online world safely and confidently. Stay safe out there.